Okay, 2-5 worksheet 1. Now, the last worksheet we did was 2-3 worksheet 2, and problem 13 and 14 were very similar to what you are going to be expected to do today in 2-5's worksheet. 2-5 worksheet is asking you to basically factor every single thing that I give you 100% all of the way, finding every possible rational, irrational, and imaginary root. Now, one thing that we have not done that is expected of you to remember is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that's going to be one that I will do with you so that you're able to see it here in a little bit. But I just want to make sure that you knew that this is exactly the same as problem 13 and 14 that we did previously. So here we go. Number 1, step 1, p over q values. So I want you to find your p over q values. So that means I'm going to do p over q. P is 16, q is 1, plus or minus 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. That is done, and that happens to be the entire list because whenever I take all those numbers divided by 1, I'm just going to get that number back. So that is it. Now, the window size that I need to be in to look at my function is going to be taking the largest number here, and then going ahead and saying that it's negative 17 to positive 17. Yes? Okay, so that is the p over q values. Now, if I'm doing p over q, I now want to go ahead and do Descartes. So Descartes says that I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to count the sign changes. So if I want my positive values, I have positive to a negative, here's 1, negative to a negative, nothing, negative to positive, there's 2. So my positive is going to be 2 or 0, because remember, how am I getting the 0? I'm subtracting 2, okay? Then I'm going to do f at negative x. I only change the signs of the odd powers, so that's negative x cubed minus 7x squared stays, plus 10x plus 16. And here I'm going to count the sign changes. There's 1, and that is it. So my negative roots are going to be 1. 1 minus 2 gives me negative 1, so that is not going to be possible, so I have to have 1. So I'm going to go ahead and say positive, negative, imaginary, and my total roots. I can have 2 paired with 1, and I can have 0 paired with 1, and I have to have a grand total of 3 roots. So that leaves 0 imaginary there and 2 imaginary here. So coming back over here, I've done Descartes. Now I want to graph it. So if I graph it, I'm looking for root 1, root 2, and root 3. Listen very closely. You do not have to do synthetic division if you can see all of the roots and they are in your P over Q list. You only do synthetic division if they are not seen and they are not in your list. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's graph this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here to Desmos. And I am going to clear this out, and I'm going to put my function in there. My function is going to be x cubed minus 7x squared minus 10x plus 16. And I'm going to hit enter. Now, remember I told you to click the wrench? And to go ahead on the wrench, I want you to go ahead and put what your window was. Your window was negative 17 to 17, and that is the step. So we know we're good here. So now I'm going to click on my graph, and I'm going to find 8, 1, and negative 2. And 8, 1, and negative 2 just happen to be part of our lovely list. So therefore, that means that we already have our roots. We know that they are 1, we know that they're negative 2, and we know that they are 8. So if I come back over here and I say I graph it and then I perform synthetic division on the values that you got from part D, I got all of the roots, so I don't need to do synthetic division, so I'm done with that. So I can say, well, all right, not needed And then part D said to factor it completely. So that's going to be x minus 1, x plus 2, and x minus 8. And that is the factored completely, and it is done. And we have nothing else that we have to do on that problem. So that is number 1 done. The next one we're going to do is number 3. Number 3 is exactly the same procedure. So the very first thing we're going to do is going to be P over Q. So P is 1, Q is 3, so that's plus or minus 1. That's plus or minus 1 and 3. So I'm going to take 1 over 1 is 1, and then 1 over 3. So my window size is going to be from negative 2 to positive 2 because that is the largest number that we have up there. Okay? Then I'm going to do Descartes. So my positive roots are going to be, there's 1 and there's 2. So my positive roots, I'm going to have 2 or 0. My negative roots, well, my negative roots mean I'm going to change only my odd powers. So 3x to the 4th stays. This becomes positive x cubed. This becomes plus 3x plus 1. Okay? Now what that means is I count my sign changes and there are none. So that tells me I have positive, negative, imaginary, and total. Well, my total has to be 4. So that means I'm going to have 2 paired with 0 and 0 paired with 0. And that has to give me a total of 4. So that means I have 2 imaginary or 4 imaginary. So what do I do next? Well, I've already done P over Q. I've already done Descartes. So now I have to graph it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to graph this function. So I'm going to come back over here to Descartes and I'm going to clear this out. And I'm going to type that in there. Number 3 is going to be 3x raised to the 4th minus x raised to the 3rd minus 3x plus 1. And I'm going to hit enter. Now, I'm going to come over here to the wrench. I'm going to set my settings. Negative 17 to 17 is okay still. So now I'm going to go ahead and be like, all right, I'm going to touch my graph. Touching my graph, now it's going to give me a 0 there and a 0 there. Okay, so what are my zeros? Well, I have 1, which I know is on my list, and then I also have negative 33. Now, technically speaking, I don't want negative 17 to 17. I actually wanted this to be negative 2 to positive 2. That's what I wanted. And as you can see here, whenever I touch this graph, you can see the zeros much easier now. And I can tell you that this is 0.333 is 1/3. So if I come back over to my graph, what this tells me is that I have 2 imaginary and 2 positive roots. And my roots just happen to be root 1, we said was 1. Root 2 was 0.33, which just happens to be 1/3. I don't know root 3 and I don't know root 4. I don't know those. So what I'm forced to do is synthetic division. So I'm going to do synthetic division at those values. So I'm going to do synthetic division at 1, and I'm going to do synthetic division at 1/3. So I'm going to have 3, negative 1, a 0, negative 3, and 1. I'm going to count these. So that's going to be x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared, x to the 1st, x to the 0. So now I'm going to do my lovely synthetic division. Drop down the 3. 3 times 1 is 3, plus negative 1 is going to be 2. That gives me a 2. 2 times 1 is 2. That gives me a negative 1 to give me negative 1 to give me a 0. 0 is what I needed because I could tell that it was a 0 across there. So now I'm going to go down a degree here. So this went from degree 4 to degree 3. And I'm going to do it again. Drop down the 3. A third of 3 is 1. A third of 3 is 1. That gives me a 3. A third of 3 is 1. That gives me a 0. So now this drops it down to degree 2. So what that means is I'm going to have 3x squared plus 3x plus 3 is equal to 0. If I pull out a 3, I'm left with x squared plus x plus 1 is equal to 0. Now, I have to be able to do this problem. How do I finish graphing it? I need to find the imaginary roots. So how do I do that? Well, the way I'm going to do that is by doing the quadratic formula. So A is 1, B is 1, and C is 1. So I'm literally going to come over here and hopefully come up here. Sorry, let me grab this. My content, if I can find it. Don't understand what's going on. Okay, I'll just write it. Sorry about that. So, x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And I plug in what I know. So that's negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 times 1 all over 2 times 1. So that's negative 1 plus or minus 1 minus 4 all over 2. So that's going to give you negative 1 plus or minus negative 3 over 2. Which is going to give you negative 1 plus or minus I square roots of 3 over 2. Those are your other two roots that you should be looking for. So that means that root 3 is going to be negative 1/2 plus or minus I square roots of 3 over 2. And that's also root 4 because it's the plus or minus. So that means the complete factorization is going to be x minus 1, x minus a third, x plus 1/2, minus I square roots of 3 over 2, and x plus 1/2 minus or plus I square roots of 3 over 2. And then that is done. That is how you are going to do all of your homework. And if you have questions, please let me know. I'll post all the answers.